If there is one thing that this story proves, it's that there's nothing new under the sun. America's first high-profile paternity case had at its center a man who wasn't even an American. Charlie Chaplin, the English actor, filmmaker, and composer, was the father in question. The man who, in the 1920s, had been arguably the most famous actor in the world, was embroiled in a serious legal drama in 1943, when a former mistress of his hit him with a paternity suit. In the end, his widely publicized and scandalous case would change how paternity tests were handled in the United States of America. This is a story of a man, a mistress, and a very costly affair. Let's get into it. But first, if you like these videos about your favorite and most scandalous celebrities from yesteryear that make the Ty Said What Ty Said channel a time capsule for the culture, subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you can know every time that I upload one of these videos or every time that I live stream, and comment "I subscribed" in the comment section so that I can say hello to you. Now, on to why you are here. In terms of the early film age, Charlie Chaplin is legendary, and his 1943 paternity suit should be too. It involved a married Charlie Chaplin and a mistress who became relentless in her efforts to be with Charlie, and when she couldn't get that, she became just as relentless in her efforts to nail him for child support. It all started in 1941, when Charlie Chaplin was married to his third wife, actress Paulette Goddard. He met a young, up-and-coming actress named Joan Berry, who also went by Joan Berry, but for the purpose of consistency in this video, we'll call her Joan Berry. Charlie contracted her to work in a film called Shadows and Substance, and according to Charlie's declassified FBI file, the two became sexually intimate very shortly after meeting. In October of 1942, Charlie Chaplin invited Joan Berry to meet him in Manhattan, and he bought a train ticket for her. She was in Los Angeles at the time. The FBI file states that while she was in New York, Joan Berry, quote, attended various parties with Chaplin, and it is alleged that he made her available to other individuals for immoral purposes, end quote. Well, that was a violation of the Mann Act, aka the White Slave Traffic Act, which states that a person cannot cross state lines to engage in prostitution or immoral behavior. Also, according to that FBI file, this behavior was nothing new to Joan Berry. She had a reputation for being a pass-around before she ever met Charlie Chaplin. See here. Quote, in addition, she has been passed around freely to various motion picture actors in Hollywood prior to and subsequent to her affair with Chaplin, end quote. 2 months after partying in New York with Charlie, Joan went back to Los Angeles. It seems as though Charlie wanted to leave the wild time that they had together in New York, but Joan had other plans. And occasionally, Charlie went along with Joan's other plans and the two would sleep together. But Joan took their bedroom activity as a sign that Charlie must have wanted to commit to her. For him, it was just sex. Then, things got bad. She started showing signs of instability. Then she was arrested for vagrancy. She eventually broke into Charlie Chaplin's house by climbing through a window, then brandishing a gun and yelling at him. She also claimed that she and Charlie were intimate at the time that she broke into his house. In court, Joan testified that she and Charlie engaged in, quote, 4 acts of intercourse at or about the date when, in the ordinary course of nature, her child must have been conceived, end quote. Oh yeah, during the course of their sexcapades, Joan got pregnant, and according to her, it had to have happened on one of the 4 days that she slept with Chaplin in December. Quote, "These acts occurred on the 10th, 23rd, 24th, and 30th days of December 1942. End quote. The vagrancy, the breaking in, the continuing her affair with Charlie likely came as no surprise to anyone who even casually knew Joan, because according to the FBI file, Chaplin contemporary Tim Durant had encounters with Joan Berry, and he had determined that she was a, quote, screwball, and he endeavored to get rid of her. As for her bundle of joy, Charlie Chaplin's thoughts were, congratulations and good luck on finding the father. Per the FBI report, quote, because of her promiscuous association with others in Hollywood, Chaplin is reportedly of the definite opinion that the child is not his, end quote. Well, on October 2nd, 1943, Joan Berry gave birth to a girl who she named Carol Ann. Here is a news article from 2 days after she was born. The super shady writer suggested that Joan Berry can tell that her daughter is Charlie Chaplin's child because he would pantomime in his silent films, and this 2-day-old baby Carol Ann also pantomimes to express that she needs food or that she is in a state of discomfort. The shade. Well, that wasn't enough to convince Charlie. Charlie Chaplin denied paternity, and when he did, Joan accused him of violating the Mann Act. Long story short, on that charge, he was indicted, then exonerated. And after she couldn't get Charlie Chaplin locked up on Mann Act charges, she still wasn't done with him. She decided to take him to court to prove that he was indeed the father of her child. This Chaplin-Berry scandal would unfold in court over the next 2 years. By then, Charlie Chaplin was divorced from his wife, who he was married to while he was sleeping with Joan Berry. He was already married to his fourth and final wife, Una O'Neill. Now, one of the reasons that Charlie claimed he couldn't be the father of Joan's daughter was that he was sterile, unable to produce children. However, the wife who he married after his affair with Joan Berry bore 8 of his children, so needless to say, he had lied about being sterile and could have been the father of Joan's child. So he had to be tested for paternity, and in the 1940s, there was only one method of determining the paternity of a child, a blood test. So blood was drawn from Charlie Chaplin, Joan Berry, and the baby girl Carol Ann. 3 doctors weighed in on the results, with each one coming to the same conclusion. Charlie Chaplin was not the child's father. This finding prompted Joan's own attorney to state that, quote, 3 distinguished medical men, preeminent in their fields, have decided that Mr. Chaplin is eliminated. We must and do abide by their conclusions, end quote. Joan basically said, that's what my attorney says, not me. She still wasn't done with Charlie Chaplin. I'm sure that her attorney was just as surprised as Charlie at the fact that she decided to further pursue this legal matter. You see, prior to the blood testing, Joan had signed an agreement with Charlie Chaplin saying that if the test concluded that he was not Carol Ann's father, that she would dismiss the charges. However, when the paternity findings weren't in her favor, she reneged and pursued Charlie further. It seems that Joan had it in her head that Charlie paid off the men in charge of the testing to lie on his behalf. Whatever her true thoughts may have been versus what was exhibited in court, Joan had no idea that her persistence would pay off in the next round. Though it was the only method of determining paternity at the time, in 1940s California, blood testing wasn't actually admissible in court. So Charlie Chaplin had 2 trials. In the first trial, the jury was deadlocked, and in the second one, in April of 1945, a jury voted 11-1 that Charlie was indeed Carol Ann's father. even though the evidence proved the exact opposite. But because of the ruling, Charlie was forced to pay child support and court fees, and he did not want to do that. What do you think? Was Charlie Chaplin the biological father of baby Carol Ann? Do you think that he paid off the medical testers to lie on his behalf? I am interested to know. Please put your responses in the comment section. This 1945 San Pedro news pilot article tells of how Charlie lied about how much money he was actually worth, and how he withdrew $290,000 to make his net worth look substantially lower than it was. When asked for records of his books so that his actual financial assets could be determined, Charlie said that his bookkeeper was the only person who had the information, and wouldn't you know it, she was on vacation. Well, nice try, Charlie, but no cigar. Chaplin spent a good portion of 1945 and 1946 appealing the ruling, but in the end, he lost. The commotion surrounding Charlie Chaplin's case led to the reformation of paternity laws in the state of California. And you know the saying, as California goes, so goes the nation. Other states eventually followed suit and reformed their paternity laws. In 1953, California, Oregon, and New Hampshire drafted the Uniform Act on Blood Tests to determine paternity. It states that, quote, if the court finds that the conclusions of all the experts as disclosed by the evidence based upon the tests that are the alleged father is not the father of the child, the question of paternity shall be resolved accordingly, end quote. Basically, if the experts who conduct the blood test say that he is not the father, then the court must also rule that he is not the father. Though Chaplin's landmark case continues to help clarify paternity laws today, it was too late for Charlie Chaplin, whose popularity was shattered along with his public image. During the course of the suit against him, Chaplin was called a lot of names, including my personal favorite, a gray-haired old buzzard. Now, there were other things that Charlie Chaplin did to shatter his own image, but we'll get into those things on a later video. On September 19th, 1952, one day after he boarded the Queen Elizabeth with his family in order to attend the world premiere of his movie called Limelight in his hometown of London, the U.S. Attorney General revoked Charlie Chaplin's re-entry permit. Charlie responded to being kicked out of the country by saying, quote, I would not go back there even if Jesus Christ was the president, end quote. Well, in 1972, Jesus wasn't the President of the United States. Richard Nixon was. Yet, that didn't stop Charlie Chaplin from returning. He came back in order to receive an honorary Oscar Lifetime Achievement Award. Charlie Chaplin's paternity case did end up making things go easier in court for men who were in fact found to not be the fathers of children when children's mothers said otherwise. But it did nothing to protect men who actually are the fathers from paying child support. So maybe one day these guys will learn. Future, Tristan Thompson, Halle Berry, PJ Washington, remember these words of my channel member, Jazzy Jeff. Don't do the grind if you can't do the time. There was a soul singer who went to the grave without claiming at least 3 of his children, Johnny Taylor. I published a video about him that you can see here. I will also leave a link to that video in the description box. My sources for this video are Mental Floss, the Federal Bureau of Investigation records on Charlie Chaplin, San Pedro News Pilot 1945 archive, Daily News Los Angeles 1943 archive, and Fresno Bee 1943 archive. If you want text notifications so that you can get a text 15 minutes before I release a video or 15 minutes before I live stream, simply send a text to 786-632-2135 to let me know that you want text, and you will get an outgoing text message 15 minutes before I have a new video release. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Ti Said What Ti Said channel. Please leave a thumbs up and comment so that we can get a discussion going. And share this video on all of your social media, especially your Facebook. That really helps me out a lot. And subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you can know when my next video is ready for you. And if you don't like what I'm saying but you love it, feel free to hit that applaud button just below your video screen there and send me some
donations.
Yeah, baby. See you on the next video.